I'll be giving a short demo on the hidden Markov models and how it can be used to learn the hidden Markov model parameters from an observed sequence of data with a finite number of different states. So I'll just let me set up my sharing. Okay, so so can you see the screen that I'm presenting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this will be the code that we'll be looking into for this demo. But just before we get into this execution, I'll just go through a few points that we will be covering. So in this demo, we'll be looking into the training problem, the training class of problems. So as we know that for a hidden Markov model, we have three types of problems. So the first type would be the likelihood class of problems, where we try to find out how likely is the hidden Markov model. I mean, how likely would be a given observed sequence be generated? I mean, what is the likelihood of that observed sequence given that we have a certain Markov model? And the second would be the decoding class of problems, wherein we try to find out what would be the most likely sequence of hidden states. So as we know, like each Markov model, like there is a sequence of hidden states that the model traverses through in order to generate the observed sequence. So what would be the most likely sequence of hidden states given that we have a certain observed sequence and a certain Markov model? But here, what we are trying to find out is that we have given this observation O equals O1, O2 up to capital T, and we have to find out what would be the desired values of the parameters pi a and b, pi being the initial set of probabilities, a is the transition probabilities. So just to clarify, pi is the initial set of probabilities, meaning that what with the probability of the Markov model of starting in a particular hidden state, and a is the transition set of probabilities, meaning that what would be the probability of transitioning to one state given that the Markov model is at a particular state at a given instance of time, and b is the emission probability, meaning that given that the observed state is, I mean, given that a particular observed state, what is the most likely hidden state that the Markov model is in at that particular instant. So to do this, to train the Markov model based on the observed sequence, we would be using something which is called the Baum-Welch method, which is an iterative expectation, estimation and maximization method. So basically what we do is like several learning procedures, we start with an initial estimate of these parameters of lambda being the HMM. We start with an initial estimate of pi a and b, and then we iteratively update these parameters until we reach the convergence criteria, until the convergence criteria is satisfied or we have exhausted the pre-designated number of iterations. So these are the mathematical expressions related to the algorithm. So before we discuss any of that, let me just guide you through the basic Python notebook that demonstrates this procedure. So as usual, we start with the imports, the necessary imports required. And this notebook is actually adapted from a pre-existing GitHub repository. So what it does is actually it's referencing a pre-designed hidden Markov model Python class file to construct the hidden Markov model and the associated training methods and the related methods for the decoding and the likelihood functions. So what we are doing after the import, we are actually generating a sequence for the training method. Now, you might ask me that what about any existing training data? Well, we can use existing training data. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we are just considering this example where we have a data set of weather conditions. Say the weather condition on any particular day can be in any one of three states. So it can be sunny, rainy, or cloudy. and it is taken on a daily basis. So if I denote sunny by 0, rainy by 1, and cloudy by 2, so if I generate a certain observed sequence for training, it could be something like this. Okay, so 2, 1, 0, so maybe cloudy, rainy, sunny, and so on and so forth. And as we have seen that the length of the training, the observed sequence is 50, we have given two states to the Markov model, and the number of different observations is obviously 3. So again, similarly, we can generate a test sequence, and I'll come to why we are generating a test sequence soon enough. So with all this, we initialize the HMM. So as we said, like we start with an initial estimate. So these are our initial estimates of the pi. This upper row is the pi, and this is the capital A, the transition probabilities that we've seen, which is denoted here by T, capital T. It is the same thing, just a nomenclature matter. And here we have the capital E. So this is corresponding to the capital B, which we saw in the handout. So the text, sorry. So this is the emission probabilities. And now we generate the hidden Markov model, the instance of the hidden Markov model with our initial estimates. And now we get into the training. So here, I'll just run it again. Here we see that the training converged pretty quickly, given that we had allowed the algorithm to run for 1,000 steps. So here you can see that the maximum step is 1,000, and the epsilon for convergence is around 0.001. So given this convergence criteria, you can see that it converged at step 18 with these values of the transition and the emission matrix. So it reached convergence, obviously, so it is true. And now that we have found out the transition and the emission matrices, we can actually do something. We can actually do the second class of problem that we talked about. I have not explicitly gone through the procedure of the second class of problems, but this is important. See, for predicting, what we could do is find the most probable sequence of hidden states using the Viterbi algorithm. Okay, so that is the decoding problem which I mentioned previously. So if we find the sequence of hidden states, we run it here. So as you can see, the state set sequences is stored in the model.viterbi. I'm sorry, the state sequence stores the sequence of the hidden states that the model has traversed through, and it runs the Viterbi underscore inference by passing the test sequence. So this is another method which is pre-built into the hidden Markov model Python class, which we imported here. So on doing that, what we get is we get this sequence of hidden states that the model has traversed. So you can see it's like 0, 1. So basically 2 hidden states. It's transitioning between 2 hidden states. And what we can do from here, when now since we know that what is the final hidden state that the model is in, so in this case it is a 1. So now that we have the transition probabilities, we can say that, okay, now I can find out, given that the model is in the second state or the 1th state, what is the most likely transition that will happen. And given that I know that what is the likely transition that is going to be made, what will be the likely transition, I could find out what could be the most likely observed state. Okay, so I just it is not I mean, it is a matter of just maxing out from the emission and the transmission probabilities. So it is not explicitly coded here. So basically what I'm saying is that basically what I'm saying is that if there are it has already traversed these hidden states, and now it is at this particular state, say, which is a 1. So now I can find out what the most likely state here will be, because I have the transition matrices. Okay, the transition 2 by 2 transition matrices. In this case, it is 2 by 2. So this is Ti. So I know. So I could say from the values which I found out, which would be the most likely state. So basically, 1 would be so this would be the most likely state. So so we find out that it is actually going to be in the 1h state also. Like it will transition to itself. It will transition to itself. Okay, so yeah, so just bear with me for one moment. So it is going to stay in the 1h state. And now that I know it will go to the 1h state, most likely, I could find out what is the most likely observed sequence that it is going to produce. Observed state that is going to produce. So this is basically how we can use it for predicting, or rather forecasting. Okay, so again, I mean, this is a very elementary example just to show you how it works. Obviously, we could modify this example. So what I had actually done is with this notebook, I had actually adapted the notebook to accommodate all types of different states and different number of observed states. So we could actually change this different number of observations that you see here from 3 to 4, and we could actually say that what about the problem of gene sequencing, where we have 4 nucleotide bases like C, G, A, and T, and we could have 2 states, basically the non-coding and decoding states, and we could then generate a Markov, we could then generate a training sequence which would have where the numbers would correspond to the nucleotide bases. So if I do this, and if I generate a sequence, so I could have something like this. Now the numbers represent, the numbers can represent, each number can be associated with a particular nucleotide base. Okay, so this is like how we can extend the usability of this Markov model. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you can this particular class of example, this particular Markov model is designed to accommodate observed sequences where the number of different observed states is finite. Now you might ask me that what about observed sequences where there is where the observed sequences are full of random variables, like like real numbers, where the number of different observed states can be infinite, like decimal values and fractional values. Well, for something like that, although it is not covered here, I could show you. Sir, should I cover this part of the HMM briefly? Where
what are you like? What is there in this part?
I would like to just touch upon what would be the modification to the Markov model when we are trying to predict observed sequences where the number of different observed states are infinite, like when there are decimal value. Okay, sir. So yes, so that is another different area, but this is basically the point which I wanted to drive to all of you. So here we have just seen that how we can train the Markov model and how we can use the updated parameters, the optimized parameters for predicting and forecasting. So yes, that is all from my side from the regarding the HMM demo. So if you have any questions, so I would be glad to take them.
So what is Viterbi inference?
Yeah, so Viterbi inference is basically, it is going to give you the most likely sequence of hidden states that the Markov model has traversed through, given that we have a certain observed sequence. So this is basically, so we find the most probable sequence of hidden states using the Viterbi algorithm. So just like you have seen in the notebook, so we passed the test sequence, the test observed sequence, to the model's Viterbi inference method, and what it gave us was the most likely sequence of states that the model will pass through in order to generate that test sequence. Okay, so having this sequence of hidden states enables us to predict what can be the next hidden state that the model can be in, because we have the transition and the emission matrices already prepared for us by the training algorithm. So from there, by combining these optimized values and the sequence of hidden states that the model has already been in, we can actually predict what will be the next hidden state that the model is likely to be in. And given that we know that what is the next state that the model will be in, we can predict what is the most likely observed state that we'll see in the future, in the next plus 1th time step. So that enables us to predict. So it is like a probabilistic prediction. Like we say what is the most likely hidden state and what is the correspondingly what is the most likely observed state. So that is where the Viterbi algorithm comes in. Okay, so I hope I could clarify that. Any further doubts? Or we can move into the upcoming the LSTM demo. So, sir, with your permission, should I share the textual handout and the Python notebook for them to experiment with and tinker around with the?
Yes, definitely. Please do that.
Okay, sir. Okay. So, sir, now I'll hand it over to Ravi Teja for the LSTM demo.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Somadipta.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Ravi Teja, please start.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Somadipta. And good evening, everyone. Just give me a minute. I'm sharing my screen. I hope my screen is visible and I'm audible enough.
Yes, fine.
So, what I will be covering on is somewhat practical aspects on how you can pull out a data set and which is existing out there on the web, and how you can, run an LSTM model on that for the time series prediction. So there are a couple of stages in which I'll be progressing through this notebook. And at the end of this 20 minutes, I'll be sharing you with the notebook with you so that you can play around with that. So there are some basic installations that you have to do, and like Kaggle and all. So there are two data sets. One I took it from the net, and then the other one which I have taken from the Kaggle. So for the first data set, which is like the passenger count of an airlines over time, I mean, like over a couple of years, is what we'll be seeing. So I am doing this particular, I mean, I'm covering this particular part because some of you have asked in the previous class on how we can practically implement and how we can experiment on, I mean, get our hands dirty on these data sets and all. So we are providing you with a particular skeleton of the code so that you can tinker around with this and you can use and modify this particular skeleton with your own data sets and networks, so and do your own experiments later on. So coming to this particular airlines data set, so we have two columns in our data set. One will be the month and year based column, then second one will be the number of passengers that were uh, traveling on airlines during that particular month of the year. So so this is a very simple data set, and our problem here is to predict the number of passengers that will be traveling in the airlines in the future. So if you just observe what you have to predict and see it, so you will be observing a graph that is something similar to this, and you'll see an upward trend that is going on. And there is also some seasonality in this particular thing. If you actually chunk this plot into year and month wise, then you will be seeing observing the seasonality aspects also. And because seasonality and trend are about advanced topics which you may, I mean, you might be knowing already. So I'm leaving it to you, or you can explore it afterwards on how you can exploit them during the training. But what I'll be covering is, like, given this particular simple data set that I have to predict the number of passengers uh, in the future, how I can use a very basic LSTM model on top of this. So first, what we have is like the month and the passenger details. Now, for our LSTM model, we'll be considering the sequences in past. So when I say sequences, suppose you are taking a sequence length of 4. So what I'll be chunking my data into is like the first four entries, that is 1949, from first month to the fourth month. I'll be taking these as input, and then I'll be trying to predict my fifth month passenger list. Like this, I will do from the second month till fifth month, then I'll be predicting the sixth month. So I'll be chunking my data into a sequence of 4 months, and then I'll be trying to predict the fifth month. Like that, I'll be doing it for the entire data set. So that particular part of code is where which is called a sliding windows here, which will be doing that chunking process, and then return to you what is your X and Y. So your X is something like that, is that whatever you are going to give to your network as input. So that is your training data, as your what we said, uh, sorry, your date and month, and then your Y will be your number of passengers. So after this, then what you have to do is, like, since you'll be training a model, after that you have to verify whether the model has been trained properly or not. So you'll be needing a test set, or in some other like when you have larger data sets, you can also chunk it down into validation set and test set also. So here, since the data set is very small, I am chunking it into two categories. One will be the train set and one will be the test set. The test set size is around 30% of the train set. So if you see the training set again, we have around 144 rows. So it is a very small data set. So I'm chunking it into a sequence length of 4, like I already explained what is the sequence length and all. So after chunking it, our data is pretty much ready. So now what we have to do is, like, we have to pass this training data to a LSTM model and then train on it. And how we do that part is what I'm going to cover right now. So before doing that, first we'll just see how do we define an LSTM model. So since sir has already covered what the RNN part of it and how RNNs are different from LSTM model, and I mean, like, LSTM usually have one extra gate that actually forget gate and other things. Apart from, in addition to the RNN, so that makes it perform better than the conventional RNNs. So I'm not going to touch on the details part of it, but I'm just going to show you how practically you can create an LSTM model and how can you give your input size and other things, and then run it. Okay. So for every model that you create in this particular PyTorch framework that we are going to use, this is your base class that you have to call, which is the nn.module. Without this, it won't work. And after this, you have to have a constructor initialization where we will be defining everything that you will be needing or you will be using in part of the model. So the first thing we'll be needing is the number of classes, then number of layers, input size, hidden size, and sequence length. So I'll touch upon this one by one. Then, so when we say number of classes, here we are predicting only the number of passengers at the end. But in some cases, we may have more than one of them. So it is basically the number of outputs we'll be having at the end of our model, or whatever is our the number of quantities that our output our model is going to predict. Then we have number of layers. Number of layers is nothing but how many layers of LSTM blocks you need on your network. Then we have input size. Input size is nothing but our feature vectors for each sample. So if you see here, for each sample, our feature vector is 1 here. So in very large data sets, if you do more feature engineering and so on and so forth, you'll have a very large number of columns, which will be your input features, based on which you'll be predicting the value in one last column. So based on your what data you are going to train on and what is your data set size and number of columns you have, you decide on your input size. Then hidden size is the number of what we say the intermediate nodes or intermediate things we are going to have, intermediate outputs we have in our entire model. So this thing is also something you can actually experiment on. So when we are running the model, I'll try to tell you how you can experiment with this and so on and other things. Then we have a class called as nn.lstm, which will actually create an LSTM model for you. So all these things that you have defined previously, you will be entering them over here to get your LSTM model. And apart from that, there are two more things. One is a batch first kind of a thing. So why batch first? I will tell you a couple of, after some time, because we don't have the concept of batch here completely. But apart from that, there is also something called as give me a minute. There is something called as bidirectional. So bidirectional LSTMs are also a type of networks that are used to train on sequence data, but they are usually used in NLP problems where you are learning the relation between, relation in a sentence from both the directions of the sentence. But in our forecasting problem, since we'll be looking at the sequence in one direction, we'll be using only conventional LSTMs or unidirectional LSTMs. Now on top of this LSTM, what you will be having is a linear layer that will be taking the output of your LSTM block, and then it will be giving you the overall output, that is your single prediction at the end. So that is your number of classes. So this completes the definition of your LSTM model. Then what we have to do is, like, given an input that is Rx, we have to do a forward pass on this LSTM, that is given an input X, you just have to predict the output. So before that, I remember in class, sir has already talked about hidden states in RNN and LSTM models. So this H of 0 is what is that hidden state is. And in LSTMs, you also have something called a cell state. So C of 0, or this particular variable here, is corresponding to that. So for every LSTM model, you have to initialize these two variables, and it is recommended that you just give based on your input size. Now, why we did this is, like, when you chunk your data into smaller batches, right? It is not guaranteed that your batches are even, like equal sizes in the entire training data. So instead of giving a constant number here, when you give it, when you initialize this based on the input sizes, input batch size that this particular forward function receives, it automatically adjusts and you won't get any error part of it. So these things are have to be initialized before you send your input value to the network. And when you're calling your LSTM, you have to send the input, which is your X, and then also you have to send the hidden state and cell states to the LSTM network. Then you will be getting the respective outputs, which you will be putting up with the fully connected layer, and you will be getting your final output. So this is your end-to-end LSTM network. Now, because our data set is small, what we will be doing here is, for every call of our LSTM model, we'll be training on the entire 100 odd examples together. Okay, 100, 110 odd examples together. That is our training set size. And wait a minute, let me just run these things. And you see, like here, I have just run the training thing. So since I have run it, you will just see like what we are doing here. So number of epochs is like how many epochs you are going to run it for. Then the learning rate is usually the step size you do while you're doing the gradient back propagation. Gradient updation, weight updation, the amount of step you are going to take towards the optimum value. Then input size is the number of, the feature size. So here, since we have only one column, we'll be taking the feature size as 1. Then hidden size, I said, like, you can experiment this with any number of values. So you can put it 3 here and then run again, like it still runs. So it's something like you can experiment with what is an optimal hidden size value. It is actually an hyperparameter, and there are some advanced techniques to find out the optimum hidden size. But for now, when you are doing it on smaller data sets, you can take it as an experiment and try finding out what suits what and why. Then the number of layers, here we are focusing on one layer of LSTM blocks. But when you have more than one layer, you call them as stacked LSTMs. And at least for these problems, they are not necessary. But when you're dealing with larger data sets, you may need to have more LSTM blocks on top of that. And since we are here predicting only one particular outcome, so number of classes is 1. So here we will be initializing our LSTM model like this based on the values we just defined. Then we have the loss function, which is initialized over here. That is our mean square loss, since this is a regression problem. But based on the problem and what you're trying to predict, you can use different losses, and you can actually, there are a lot of losses in literature that might actually help you optimize your network. And you can actually dig up on them on what suits your particular problem based on what you're trying to actually optimize. Then we have a optimizer that comes up. So I have listed down two optimizers here. One is Atom and SGD, which are mostly used, but there are other variants of optimizers. So it's up to you to experiment on these things, but the overall skeleton of using an optimizer is given here. So you just call the optimizer whatever you want to use, and then you have to give the parameters of the model. So here LSTM is our model. So we'll just send the parameters that we are calling in. Then we define the learning. I mean, we give the learning rate that we have that we are going to use. After that, you just have to run this particular training thing for a set of epochs, where you'll be passing the training data to your LSTM model and you'll be getting outputs. So after each output, the main particular thing in Torch is you have to call optimizer.zeroGrad to flush out the previous gradients and then compute the loss. And you have to do the back propagation of loss where you'll be computing gradients. Then optimizer.step is there where it updates the weight. So these are two different things. So I have just commented it out. Maybe you can actually look out a bit more on what actually happens here, but that is not a part of this course, so we're not touching upon that. So this is like an entire training summary, and like you can see, although we are running it for 2000 epochs, the training has completed very quickly. That is because our data set is like very small, like 140 examples in overall. But when you are actually considering very large data sets that I'll be touching upon in the second part of the demo, then we have to do something called as a we have to use something called as a data loader to chunk our data into smaller parts and then do the training part of it. So I'll just cover it up. But before that, since we have already trained our network, so just give me a minute. So I'll just show you the previous part of it. So this is again like we are just reiterating over it again just because just to show that on smaller data sets it wouldn't matter much, and for larger data sets I'll just cover it up in a couple of minutes. Now since we have trained the network, then we have to evaluate on it. So for evaluation purposes, you can either put up your test set and see the performance for it, or if you want to study in detail, you can give your entire data set including training and testing and see how it has learned the training set that is before this particular red line and how it is performing on the test set that is after this particular red line. So let me just run this also for you. Yeah, so there is not much change because it's the same code. So you see that for the training part, it has fitted up very well with whatever the prediction, whatever the true values are there that is given by the blue line. But for the test part of the set, which the model has we did not see, it is not doing that well. I mean, it is doing well in capturing the seasonality of it, but the exact particular values, it's not able to match up. So there are you can do a bit more feature engineering if you have more data available, and then add more features so that your network can pick up those features and learn from them. Now that completes the first part of it. Now for the second part, I'm going to pick up a data set from Kaggle. So for Kaggle, there are two things. So since one of you has asked previously, I've just thought of covering this part also. So when you log into your Kaggle account, you have something called as create new API token. So you click on this, you will have a JSON file getting downloaded. Now, what you have to do is like if you're running it on your local, you just have to give the particular path for your JSON file, or if you're running it on Colab, you just have to upload this particular JSON file over here. So this will authorize your downloading of the data set. Okay. Now there are some interesting data sets on Kaggle related to time series. So what you can do is like you can go to that whatever data set you're you want to work on or experiment on, then you'll have an API command kind of a thing over here, which is like this, and you can copy it and you just have to paste it over here, and then running it will download your data set onto your Colab instance. So this is very easy way to do rather than downloading and uploading in case of very large data sets. That is one thing. Second thing is like just remember whenever you're downloading data sets from Kaggle that are very large, to put them in one particular folder, otherwise they'll be downloaded over here and it makes it a bit clumsy for you to handle when you're doing large projects. After that, you just have to unzip whatever you have done, and then we'll come back to the data dealing part of it. Now, since I've compressed things, Here you can see there are multiple CSV files that are given to us. One is like the sales data. Apart from that, there are 3 other things that are given to us. So this is one particular example where you have large amount of data and how you can deal with that particular large amount of data by creating new features. So I'll not be touching upon how you will be creating new features and other things, but I'll be showing you like what are some necessary things that you have to do to deal with this particular data. Now, since this is a Kaggle challenge, you have a lot of information about this online and you can search it also. One first thing is like when you have date time objects or any particular columns in the data set, the CSV file, which have to be in particular format. So you have to convert them. So here, this particular date time is have to convert into pandas date time format, so that your model or it's not confusing with anything. Otherwise, it will just take it as a number. So you have to take those precautions for very particular columns that have things. Now that also, one of you might actually ask like, what do we do in type of categorical data and other things? Like in case of shop ID and item ID. So these are like categorical data, and there are ways to deal with categorical data like one-hot encoding and other things. Now I'm not going to completely touch upon that, but I have an alternative way where you can deal with it, which I have covered in the supplementary part of this notebook. So if I have time, I'll be touching upon them. Otherwise, like I'll give you the notebook and it's explained in detail, so you can cover that part of it up. So once we have the training data, so what essentially they did here is like instead of item count per day, they have calculated the item count per month, and they want to predict the item count per month. So that part of it is like clear from the problem statement. Next, the major point of taking this particular data set is like you have seen here there are around 16 lakh rows or 16 lakh samples. Now it is pretty much difficult to train on all 16 lakh samples, because once you start sending all this data onto your LSTM model, you'll be running out of RAM. So you have to chunk this down into batches and do it. Now, how we'll be doing it, I'll show you right now. Just 1 minute. So like we did before, we'll be we'll be processing our data into training and sample, and we'll be creating sequences. So this is the first step we'll be doing. Now on top of that, we'll be using something called as torch.data loader. So Torch has something called as a data loader class, which will be doing that batching process for you. Now, for this particular data loader, what you have to give as input is your training features and your training labels or ground truths. So these are what you want to predict. Then you have to give the batch size, and if you want to shuffle, you can shuffle it. Otherwise, you don't need to shuffle it. Then the rest ones are some miscellaneous things, like you can check if you are interested. Now, this is a custom data loader. So this is something I have written down, but I'll just explain you what is there. But you can do it for, on your own. So in a custom data loader, you'll be just taking the input, and you'll be reading each sample from the input, and you'll be giving out to the output. So what this data loader does is like for all the list of train X it has received, it will read out each sample until the batch size is retrieved, and it will return that as an entire batch. Okay. Now, if you are really good at programming and other things, you can exploit this custom data loader to the maximum extent by putting up this sliding window and all other functions that other things that we have done here into this particular custom data loader by defining multiple functions over here. Also, you can deal here. You can use this to deal with the categorical encoding of particular columns and other things. So this particular thing will allow us to, okay, I did not run this, sorry. So this will run this one. So here we are using larger batch sizes. That is because our data is like very small. We only have 3 feature vectors and one thing we have to predict, and so we can use larger batch sizes because we can accommodate larger batch sizes because of the smallness in data. But you cannot do that with images or any other kind of data. Now next is like the training approach. So our LSTM remains the same, but I have changed the input because here our input is like 3 sequences that I have shown you in the data frame part of it. Then here I also did some experimenting with the hidden size of it. I changed it and so on and so forth. So I'm just covering it for a few epochs. Then learning rate is also something you can experiment on. But overall, like number of classes we'll be predicting is like one value, so it is still one. So here the difference is like you will be having another loop apart from your epoch loop for the data loader. So it will keep on giving you data in batches of whatever batch size you have given, and your network will be training on those particular batch size instead of the entire training data at once. So I'll just run this also for you. This might take some time. Meanwhile, if anybody has some doubt, like you can shoot at me. Okay, so then then the evaluation process for this is also same. You can refer to the notebook. I'm not going to cover most of it. Only thing is like you can do multiple things. Like I just tried to experiment here on showing you the evaluation part of it for only the test set and for the entire training data together. And I mean, these are just plots and visualizations that you can do in Python. So this part of it is like easy if you're good with programming. Otherwise, like I have some sample code here, you can refer to that. I'll also cover the supplementary materials very quickly so that you can have an understanding of what is actually happening in the industry and other things. So PyTorch also has something called as PyTorch forecasting. So it is uh, it is something very easy for new people to start with. So they have some state-of-the-art models which you can directly take and train upon, but usually you need some large amount of data to train those huge models. So I have covered the installation and other parts, but what I wanted to touch upon is like when you have categorical and categorical data like shop ID and item ID, these things, this particular package will provide you with categorical encodings. So you just have to give the column name and you just have to use an encoder for that, and it will just replace things over there. Also, since we have, I have shown you the generation of the sequences for a constant length, but here you can generate the sequences for multiple lengths. So here the maximum length is 27, starting from a minimum prediction length of 1. So you can generate maximum different sequence lengths, and you can train on different sequence lengths actually. Then the data loader part of it also works very quickly. Then from the state of art perspective, what we are trying to do is there are a couple of things that are like learning rate finding and other things that you can quickly do with this particular package and so on. So that is also being covered here. If you are interested, you can explore that. Apart from that, there is also like another set of models called temporal fusion transformers. So if you are interested, again, like you can use them. But more or less, the entire skeleton of the code remains the same. Finally, what I have included at the end of the notebook is like, in case if you are using the GPU instances and other things, a piece of code that you can leverage to put your data onto GPU and how to do that part if some of you are not known to or not used to using GPU systems. So, and some examples on how to put that also. So this is very brief supplementary material that we have gathered for you. And this is based on one of the notebooks from the challenge itself, which is very goodly built up. So in case if anyone is interested, you can have a look at this. And now I hope like almost we are at the end of the training and you can see the loss is decreasing. So, but the main thing is like when you're training on batches, right? Whatever loss you're seeing is the average loss across the entire batch. It's not like the accumulative loss, it's the average loss. So although it is showing 0, it doesn't mean that it's exactly 0. There might be some more decimal points, and because it's averaging over a large set of batch, so it is like nearly 0. So I mean that is also clearly visible from this particular graph, where although our losses are near to 0, but our predictions are not that good. So that makes it a bit more clear on using larger batches, but you have to like print out the losses so that you know where the network is training or how much more time you have to train the network for. Yeah. If anybody has any doubts still here or anything from the implementation point of it. So, okay. So then I will just share the notebook with you over the chat itself. So you can just copy this notebook onto your own Google Drive and start running it. But when you're using the Kaggle instance, just remember to put down your own kaggle.json file and then restart it and use it. Sir, do you want me to cover anything else apart from these?
Do you have any more material to cover?
Nothing, sir.
Okay, then fine. Okay, then fine. So if the students have any questions or any doubts, they may ask. Also, please share the like all the notebooks and everything with them.
I
Please
have already shared
Yes, sir.
this thing. So
Yeah, like where have you shared? Did you upload them in the Teams?
I have given them a link for the thing, so I'll also upload the notebook in the.
Yeah, please upload. Like just create a folder and just upload in that. I'm creating a separate folder for that.
Okay, sir. I'll upload it after this session concludes.
Okay. I've created a folder called sample codes. You can in the file section, you may upload everything there.
Okay, sir.
Okay, then thank you. So if the students have any questions or any doubts, you can ask. You can ask to Ravi Teja and Shomadipto. Okay, if not, then thank you. Thank you, everyone. So tomorrow we will have the class by Professor Pulak Mishra.